Do you want to stop existing and start living? My new book, A Deeper Wellness, can help you just do that. Through its 18 chapters and challenging self-reflective exercises, you'll learn how to heal your past, deal with the problems that you are struggling with today, and begin to build a future you want and deserve. Order your copy of A Deeper Wellness on Amazon.com or Amazon.ca. And now, let's get to our mindful moment. Understanding complex PTSD. That's today's topic. While most of us are familiar with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, we are completely unaware of complex PTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's explore the causes, symptoms, and treatments of this little known disorder, as many of us are probably walking around people and being affected by many people who are struggling with this. To understand complex PTSD, it's important to understand PTSD. Its symptoms, causes, that's important. PTSD begins with a traumatic event where you or somebody close to you is in a near-death, life-threatening situation, and then day-to-day triggers take you back to that event through flashbacks and nightmares. As I mentioned, PTSD begins with a traumatic experience or an exposure to actual or threatened sudden death, serious injury, violent assault, or sexual violence. It could also involve serious injury or the sudden unexpected death of a loved one. PTSD can also occur after witnessing firsthand and experiencing some sort of traumatic life-threatening situation like a natural disaster, serious car accident like an automobile or plane crash, physical or sexual assault, combat, or war-like exposure. It's important to understand it's a sudden change in your reality that affects us with PTSD. While PTSD is linked to a single event or experience or a cluster of related events, complex PTSD pertains to the longer-term exposure to a traumatic situation. Complex PTSD involves prolonged, repeated experiences, often in childhood, of emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, domestic violence, or neglect. Prolonged exposure to traumatic situations later in life, like being a victim in human trafficking, living in a war zone with no hope of escape, or being the victim of torture, can lead to complex PTSD. Common symptoms. As with PTSD sufferers, those who suffer with complex PTSD may be plagued with intrusive and upsetting memories or dreams. They may experience flashbacks and sometimes even feel that they're still in a life-threatening situation or danger. They may suffer momentarily to prolonged distress when exposed to a trigger, that is to say, a reminder of their trauma. Even subtle triggers like a sound, smell, sight can remind them of an element of their traumatic event. This might set off distressing psychological reactions, and they may have great difficulty concentrating and sleeping. They feel isolated, alone, and unsafe in the world. Prolonged trauma. Unlike PTSD, which is linked to a single event or cluster of events, complex PTSD sufferers also suffer from strong negative views of themselves. They often harbor a deep sense of shame and blame themselves for what they have gone through. They often protect the person who's abused or neglected them because that person was also involved in their care or kindness at one point. They feel helpless and unable to make their way in the world. Complex PTSD is an interpersonal in nature, and it results in a way where sufferers may struggle to establish healthy, safe relationships with one another due to their prior exposure to unhealthy relationships and unsafe dynamics. They're also not able to control their negative emotions. They may feel deep mistrust of others and avoid relationships altogether. They struggle with feelings of deep despair and feel isolated and helpless. Many times, people who suffer from PTSD or complex PTSD abuse alcohol and drugs, as that's a form of substances that tend to numb their sensations and experiences or thoughts that trouble them with flashbacks and nightmares. Complex PTSD versus borderline personality disorder. Complex PTSD is a relatively new diagnosis with many symptoms in common with borderline personality disorder. Untreated PTSD can lead to borderline personality disorder, which is a mistrust of people after you've gone through a lot of difficulties. And borderline personality disorder can have a lot of misinterpretations of behaviors and actions by the way people behave. What sets complex PTSD apart from borderline personality disorder is a history of prolonged abuse and strong, unchanging negative views of themselves. Additionally, while people suffer from complex PTSD are at risk of self-harm, those suffering from borderline personality disorder are at a far greater risk of self-harm and suicide. It's a personality feature now that worsens any clinical disorder. The effect of the trauma on the brain. Traumatic or distressing experiences can change the way the brain responds to threats. Trauma essentially shuts down the neural pathways between the amygdala, the part of the brain that harbors trauma but is unable to process it, and the part of the brain that can process it. When this happens, victims of trauma can remain stuck and unable to process and recover from a distressing event or series of events. This leaves those suffering in the aftermath of a trauma stuck in an anxious cycle, hopeless cycle, unable to move beyond their experiences. While recovery from complex PTSD can take time, attention, and effort, there are a lot of effective treatments. It is important to realize that we all may have layers of trauma, things that we remember from the past that affect us deeply, but some of these complex PTSDs can be a little bit more detrimental and higher in symptoms, physiological, negative thoughts, and negative behaviors. Effective treatments, there are many. As with any mental health condition, the ability to recognize your symptoms is the first step to finding help. The good news is that there are highly effective treatments out there available. And if someone close to you or yourself is suffering from PTSD, it's no time like the present to begin to heal and create a better future for yourselves. Treatments for PTSD include cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and dialectical behavior therapy, DBT. A tremendously effective form of therapy for sufferers of complex PTSD is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. EMDR opens neural pathways between the part of the brain that is unable to process trauma and the part of the brain that can do so. EMDR is proven to greatly relieve, reduce, or remove psychological stress. Let's take a mindful moment now, breathing in and out, and just reflect on our life. Are there some subtle traumas that I have dealt with, or things that still come to me in memories and flashbacks? Or am I struggling still with symptoms that are from significant traumas in my life, and maybe I do have PTSD or complex PTSD? Let's take a mindful moment to inhale and exhale and reflect on our life and our symptoms. Take a deep inhale in and a deep inhale out. Another deep inhale and breathe out. As I gently bring you back from your mindful moment, as a reminder, we can go beyond our negative experiences. That is important for you to recognize. It is important to recognize the first step to treatment is awareness. Be aware of your body's symptoms, physiologically, negative thoughts that race around in your head, and the negative behaviors you do to cope. As a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma, I know that we are more than our negative experiences, and that when we experience and process our past hurts, we can move beyond the pain and suffering and live a happier life, but we do need to address things. We can stop merely existing and start living. Let's take charge today of our symptoms. You deserve to live a better quality of life. You deserve to be in your highest and best. Seeking treatment for PTSD. If you believe that you may be struggling with complex PTSD, there is no time like the present to begin to heal. Start by confiding in a trusting friend who can support you while you connect with resources that you need. Talking to your family doctor or primary care physician is a great start to share your symptoms and have a professional guide you to resources. Talking allows you to also get outside of yourself to seek help where people can understand and relate to your symptoms. Explore online complex PTSD or PTSD resources. There are many beautiful places, centers, hospitals that have units dealing with complex PTSD. But online you can find many resources these days. Seek help from your insurance provider if you're an employee with an EAP plan. Employee benefits cover a lot of treatment, and the insurance providers have knowledge on what resources are out there to help what conditions. Reach out, get help, but remember, it's time to stop existing and start living.